The shotgun blast echoed through the cornfields like God's own thunder, splintering the old oak door just inches from Johnny's head. "You ain't my son no more," his father's voice roared from inside the farmhouse, thick with whiskey and hate, the words landing harder than any bullet could. Johnny froze on the gravel drive, heart hammering, tasting blood from where he'd bitten his lip raw because in that split second, he knew this was the end of everything he'd ever called home. It was the summer of 2018 in Milford, Ohio, a speck of a town where the biggest excitement was the annual county fair and the biggest sin was loving the wrong way. Johnny Harlan, 22 and fresh out of community college with a half-assed associate's in graphic design, had spent his life dodging shadows. His family was the salt-of-the-earth kind. Dad, a Vietnam vet turned John Deere mechanic with hands like sandpaper and a temper to match. Mom, a quiet Baptist who'd bake apple pies for the church potluck but whisper prayers against that devil's curse when she thought no one was listening. And his older sister, Becca, married at 19 to a high school football coach who quoted Bible verses like touchdowns. Johnny had always been the quiet one, the artist sketching sunsets in the margins of his algebra notebook, the kid who fixed the neighbor's leaky faucet without asking for a dime. But lately, the sketches had shifted, soft lines curving into the strong jaw of the barista at the diner's coffee shop, or the easy grin of the mechanic who tuned up Dad's truck. It started small. A stolen glance in the locker room after gym class back in high school, a knot in his gut that twisted tighter every Sunday sermon on Sodom and Gomorrah. By the time he turned 20, the knot had become a noose. The blow-up came on a muggy July night, the kind where cicadas screamed like they knew what was coming. Johnny had been out with friends from the community center's LGBTQ+ support group, his first real taste of not hiding, and he'd let slip a laugh too loud, a hand lingering too long on a guy's shoulder. Word traveled fast in Milford. By morning, Becca's husband had cornered him in the barn, Bible in one hand, fist in the other. "We know what you are. Freak," he'd snarled, shoving Johnny against the hay bales. "Pack your shit and go before you drag us all to hell." Johnny didn't fight back. He never did. Instead, he waited till Dad got home from the VFW hall, reeking of Bud Light, and laid it out plain. "I'm gay, Dad. I can't pretend anymore." The silence stretched like taffy, broken only by the creak of Mom's rocking chair on the porch. Then Dad's face crumpled, not with tears, but rage. "Get out," he spat. "And don't come back. Not ever. Unless," he trailed off, eyes narrowing like he was sighting down a rifle barrel. "Unless you bring home a wife. Fix this abomination. Prove you're still one of us." Johnny left that night with a duffel bag, $300 from his savings, and a sketchpad clutched like a shield. Mom watched from the kitchen window, her apron twisted in her hands, but she didn't say goodbye. Becca just shook her head, muttering about choosing sin over family. The Greyhound to Cleveland cost $20. The rest bought him a week in a Fleabag motel, ramen noodles, and endless job applications that went nowhere because who hires a queer kid from nowhere with no connections? Cleveland was a beast, gritty, alive, unapologetic. Johnny crashed on a buddy's couch from the support group, a wiry tattoo artist named Marco who chain-smoked camels and blasted RuPaul while inking skulls on bikers. "Own it, kid," Marco said one night, passing a joint as sirens wailed outside. "The world's full of assholes, but the good ones, they'll see you shine." Johnny nodded, but inside, he was unraveling. Nights blurred into sketches of phantom embraces, days into minimum wage gigs, barista at a hipster cafe, where he burned his fingers on espresso machines and dodged flirty customers. Delivery boy for a pizza joint, dodging traffic on a rusty Schwinn. That's where he met Fred. It was a Tuesday in September, rain slicking the streets like oil on water, when Johnny pedaled up to a brownstone in the warehouse district. The door swung open to a wall of a man, 6'4", built like a linebacker gone to seed, with a salt and pepper beard framing a face etched by too many bar fights and not enough sleep. Fred Callahan, ex-Marine, bouncer at a dive called the Rusty Anchor, and the kind of guy who made grown men cross the street. "Pizza?" he grunted, tossing Johnny a crumpled 20 and a glare that could curdle milk. But Johnny didn't flinch. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the way Fred's eyes, storm gray and haunted, locked on his for a beat too long. "Keep the change," Fred said, softer than his bark. "You look like you need it more than I do." Johnny pocketed the bill, sketched a quick doodle of a snarling wolf on the receipt, and slid it back. "For the tip," he said with a half-smile. Fred's laugh rumbled like distant thunder, low, surprised. Kids got balls. It started like that, small collisions. Johnny's deliveries became excuses to linger, trading barbs over cold slices. Fred was a fortress, divorced twice, kid from the first marriage who wouldn't call him dad, scars from Fallujah that he hid under ink and attitude. "Love's a sucker's game," he'd say, nursing a whiskey neat at the Anchor after closing. But he'd listen when Johnny spilled about Milford, the shotgun door, the words that still echoed like buckshot in his chest. "Family's blood," Fred grunted once, staring into his glass. "But blood don't mean loyalty. Sometimes it's the strangers who bleed for you." By Halloween, the collisions turned electric. They were at a warehouse party Marco dragged Johnny to, strobe lights pulsing like heartbeats, bass thumping through veins of exposed brick. Fred showed up uninvited, a shadow in the crowd, pulling Johnny onto the makeshift dance floor. "Thought you could hide from me?" Fred murmured, breath hot against Johnny's ear, hands firm on his hips. Johnny's world tilted, Fred's stubble grazing his neck, the scent of leather and smoke wrapping around him like a promise. They kissed in a corner, fierce and fumbling, tasting salt and surrender. "This ain't smart," Fred whispered after, forehead to forehead. "I'm twice your age, twice the trouble." Johnny grinned, reckless. "Good thing I'm all out of smart." Winter hit Cleveland like a freight train, snow piling drifts against the Anchor's windows, but inside, heat bloomed. Fred's apartment was a third-floor walk-up in Tremont, peeling wallpaper, a fridge stocked with beer and takeout, a king bed that creaked under their weight. Johnny learned Fred's rhythms, the way he'd wake at dawn with ghosts in his eyes, sketching maps of desert patrols on napkins, the tender side he hid, cooking chili from his ma's recipe and humming Springsteen off-key. They made love slow and urgent, Fred's calloused hands mapping Johnny's skin like uncharted territory, Johnny's fingers tracing the shrapnel scars that puckered Fred's shoulder. "You're safe here," Fred murmured once, post-climax glow fading into vulnerability. "No one's taking that from you," but Milford's shadow lingered. Christmas cards arrived like indictments, Becca's, with a photo of her kids in reindeer sweaters. The note inside, "Come home fixed, brother. We miss the real you." Johnny burned it in the sink, ashes swirling down the drain, but the ache festered. Fred saw it, pulled him close on New Year's Eve as fireworks cracked over the Cuyahoga. "What if we ran?" Johnny whispered, champagne buzz making him bold. South. Maybe. Florida. Start over. Fred's jaw tightened. Running's what I did after the Corps. Left buddies buried in the sand. Ain't doing that to you. Spring thawed the ice. But not the rift. Johnny landed a freelance gig designing logos for local bands. Enough to chip at student loans. But the calls from Mom sporadic, tearful, eroded his resolve. He's dying. Johnny. The cancer's back. Come say goodbye proper. Dad's prostate. Aggressive. Stage 4. Johnny paced Fred's kitchen. Phone clutched like a grenade. They said not to come back unless I bring a wife, he choked out. Fred's face darkened. That old marine steel surfacing. Fuck him. You're going. And I'm coming with you. The drive to Milford was a 6-hour gauntlet. Interstate 71 slicing through Rust Belt ghosts. Johnny white-knuckling the wheel of Fred's battered Ford F-150. Fred's shotgun with a thermos of black coffee and a Glock tucked under the seat, just in case. They talked in circles. Johnny's fear of rejection. Fred's disdain for small-town bigotry. They see a queer kid and a has-been jarhead, Fred said, lighting a Marlboro out the window. But they ain't seeing us. Johnny glanced over, heart swelling at Fred's profile, rugged, unyielding, his anchor in the storm. I love you, he said, simple as breathing. Fred's hand covered his on the gearshift, thumb stroking knuckles. Love you more, kid. Always will. They rolled into Milford at dusk. The town unchanged. Grain silos like sentinels. The single stoplight blinking yellow. Pickup trucks parked crooked outside the feed and seed. The Harlan farmhouse squatted on 5 acres off Route 42. Paint peeling like old skin. The oak door splintered but standing. Becca's minivan was in the drive. Inside, the air hung heavy with fried chicken and regret. Mom met them at the screen door, eyes red-rimmed, apron dusted with flour. Johnny? She breathed, then froze at Fred's shadow behind him. Whose? Dad's husband, Johnny said, voice steady despite the quake in his chest. It was a lie. Half-formed, they talked rings over diner pancakes, but vows were for later. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. From the living room, Becca's gasp cut sharp. Dad was in the recliner, gaunt under the quilt, oxygen tube snaking to his nose, eyes milky but sharp. The hell is this? He rasped, struggling up as Fred stepped forward, hand extended like a truce. Fred Callahan, sir. Johnny's man. Fred's voice was gravel, respectful but unbowed. The room crackled, Becca clutching her cross necklace, Mom fluttering like a trapped bird. Dad's gaze raked Fred. The tattoos peeking from his collar, a marine eagle, a faded Semper Fi. The breadth of him filling the doorway. Whispers had flown ahead. Becca's husband must have heard from a cousin in Cleveland. That queer kid's shacking up with Callahan? The one who beat a guy half to death at the Anchor last year? Christ. He's trash. But Dad didn't swing. He sank back, wheezing. Sit, he croaked. Before I keel over from the sight. Dinner was a minefield. Chicken congealing on mismatched plates. Small talk detonating into accusations. You turned your back on us? Becca hissed at Johnny. Fork stabbing peas. For him, a drunk with a rap sheet. Fred's jaw clenched. But he stayed silent, squeezing Johnny's knee under the table, a lifeline. Mom tried bridge building. Fred. You serve. Marines. Ma'am. 03 to 08. Dad grunted approval. A flicker of the old vet surfacing. Heard of Fallujah? Tough shit. By night's end, fragile peace held. Johnny and Fred bunked in the guest room. Twin beds pushed together. Whispers in the dark. This ain't forgiveness, Johnny murmured, tracing Fred's chest. It's survival. Fred kissed his temple. One step, kid. That's all it takes. But Milford had teeth. Word spread like kudzu. Johnny Harlan back with his thug boyfriend. Dad on death's door tolerating it for scraps of time. Becca's husband, Tom, cornered Fred at the gas station next morning. Shotgun rack gleaming in his truck bed. Stay away from my family, queer lover, he snarled. Fred didn't rise, just lit a smoke, eyes level. Families who shows up, Tom. Not who throws punches. Tom backed down, but the venom seeped. Johnny split time. Bedside vigils with Dad. Trading stories of boyhood fishing trips. Coffee with Mom. Her apologies tasting like ash. I failed you, she whispered once, hands trembling over tea. Prayed you'd be normal. Johnny forgave her, because what else was there? But Fred hung back. A ghost in the kitchen. His presence a lit fuse. One night, after Dad coughed through a morphine haze, he beckoned Fred close. You love him, more than my life, sir. Dad nodded, frail hand on Fred's arm. Good. Don't let him break like I did. The betrayal came swift as a summer squall. Becca, playing confidant over lunch at the diner, ham salad sandwiches and milkshakes, leaned in with crocodile tears. I just want what's best. Johnny. Tom's got connections. He heard about Fred. Assault charges. Dishonorable whispers from the core. He's dangerous. Johnny laughed it off at first, but doubt wormed in. That evening, he rifled Fred's duffel while he showered. Found letters. Yellowed. A psych eval from VA. PTSD black on white. A custody denial for his kid. Unfit due to violent tendencies. Heart sinking. Johnny confronted him poolside at the old quarry. Fireflies winking like lies. It's true, Fred admitted. Voice raw. Beat a sergeant bloody after a convoy ambush. Thought he was the enemy. Got shipped stateside. Drummed out quiet like. And the bar fight? Guy was hassling a kid like you. I snapped. Johnny recoiled. The man he'd built dreams on fracturing. You lied. Said you were done running. Fred reached. Desperate. Not from you. Never. But the seed was planted. Becca's whispers. Tom's glares. Dad's weakening grip. Go back to Cleveland, Johnny said. Tears hot. Before you drag me down too. Fred left at dawn. Truck rumbling away. Taillights fading into fog. Johnny told himself it was right. Fixing the family. Earning his place. Days blurred. Dad's chemo. Mom's casseroles. Becca's smug smiles. But nights were voids. Sketches turning to ash. Dad noticed. Rasping from his deathbed. That man. He saw you. Really saw. Don't be a fool like me. Johnny broke then, sobbing into the quilt that smelled of Benghazi and regret. He chased Fred to the anchor, pounding the bar till knuckles bled. Fred was there, hollow-eyed over whiskey. You came back, he breathed, pulling Johnny into the stockroom. Shelves of bottles rattling as they collided, kisses bruising, apologies unspoken. I can't lose you, Johnny gasped. Not to them, not to ghosts. Fred held him fierce. Then we fight. Together, they returned to Milford unannounced. Hand in hand, rings glinting, vowed hasty in a Cleveland courthouse. Witnesses Marco and a drag queen named Ruby. The farmhouse erupted. Tom blocking the drive with his truck. Becca wailing scripture. Mom torn between horror and hope. Dad, propped in his chair. One last breath rattling. Let him in. But Tom lunged. Fist flying, Fred caught it midair, twisting just enough to drop him without a punch. Enough, Fred growled. Your hate ends here. The brawl spilled onto the lawn. Tom swinging wild. Becca shrieking. Neighbors gawking from picket fences. Johnny shielded Dad's view, but the old man wheezed a laugh. Like I said, kid. Bleed for him. Sirens wailed. Cops hauled Tom away, cuffs clicking like finality. Becca fled to her minivan, slamming doors on fractured bonds. Mom collapsed into sobs, clutching Johnny. Forgive me, she begged. All of it. Dad passed at midnight, under a harvest moon. Johnny and Fred at his side, hands linked over the bed rail. Proud, he murmured, eyes on them. Finally, the funeral was small. Graveside at the Lutheran plot, bagpipes keening Amazing Grace. Becca came, distant. Tom stayed jailed on assault. Mom hugged Fred awkward, whispering, Take care of my boy. He nodded. Always have. They drove west after, toward California sun. Fred's disability check and Johnny's remote design work buying a cottage in Big Sur. Waves crashing like applause. Letters from Mom trickled. Photos of Becca's kids. Questions about grandkids the modern way. Forgiveness wasn't linear, but it grew roots in soil turned by pain. Johnny sketched their life. Fred fishing at dawn. Lines cast hopeful. Evenings on the deck. Stars wheeling overhead. Bodies entwined against the chill. One night, fire crackling. Fred pulled out a ring box, simple gold, etched with wolves. Marry me proper? Johnny laughed through tears. Thought we already did. Yeah, Fred grinned. That thunder rumble. But let's make it stick. They did. Under redwoods, with sea salt on their lips. Milford faded to memory. A scar, not a chain. Love, Johnny learned, wasn't fixing brakes. It was building bridges over them, hand in scarred hand. In the end, they told him not to come home. But home followed him. Fierce, flawed, forever.